I always say that St. Manchan Shrine is like looking at 300 years of Irish metalsmithing on a box.
What we are looking at is predominantly work of the early 12th century, and that's what's so special about it.
There's not as many visitors seeing it as there would be in the National Museum. However, we have to keep part of Offaly within Offaly.
The Shrine of St. Manchan is one of the great pieces of medieval Irish art, and since its creation in the 12th century, it has been cradled in the ancient parish of Lemanaghan in County Offaly.
As part of my study, I spent the best part of a week with the shrine, and as part of that process, or how I would look at objects, I tend to draw them, and very quickly I was able to realise that not only was I dealing with something that was very closely related to the Cross of Cong, but I was under no illusion that this was actually made by the same craftsman. Mélisu MacBrathon Iachuk was his name.
Like the Cross of Cong, the craftsman used wood as the core structure of the shrine. In the shrine, yew was the chosen wood, a slow-grown timber that is unlikely to expand and contract. The shrine itself was built to house St. Manchan's bones and still contains 3 adult human bones today.
My earliest memory was it was just sitting there. Every 24th of January it was opened. It contains the relics, some bones of St. Monaghan, and they were taken out and venerated by the local people. People would go up and kiss the bones of the priests would hold out. And
the shrine was designed to be carried in procession, and the locals of Lemanaghan have been venerating the saint's life for centuries.
I remember as a small child and thinking to myself, oh my God, what is going on here? Do you know, but yeah, it was like, it was a huge part of growing up. And you couldn't miss it, because if you missed it, something bad could happen to you, you know.
One of the things that I worked on towards our celebration of the Holy Mass for that night is to bring people into that presence. So after the celebration of Eucharist, while we gather around the table of word in Eucharist, then we have a moment after Mass where we just place the Blessed Sacrament on the altar. And we become aware of the presence of spirituality, linking into the spirituality of St. Manchan, who is present with us in the shrine. And it gives people, and it's about the silence of that prayer, but it's also where it leads them. It leads them to a place where, I always say, silence speaks stronger than any words, you know, and I think that's the deep spirituality that we need to nurture in life as well.
I wanted to see how much of a skeleton could you fit into something this size. I have a colleague, he's an osteoarchaeologist, he specialises in the study of human bones. In fact, he found that you could fit a whole human skeleton into the shrine.
This type of shrine may have been commonplace at this period in Christianity.
The shrine that we're looking at now is very unique. It's a completely unique object, but maybe it wasn't actually unique in the period in which it was made, and that there were a number of shrines that looked like this in the period and that were actually made by the same craftsman.
Kevin O'Dwyer is an internationally lauded metalsmith, but he traces his craft right back to the medieval craft tradition.
I carry a lot of the same hand tools that were from hundreds of years and lead all the way back to the monastic metalsmithing traditions. I consider like that 12th century was the second period of really the height of Irish metalsmithing.
Kevin and Griffin worked together to publish a definitive history of the shrine.
Today's castings are no better than this. When I look at some of the animals, etc., they're as, you know, they're as fine as I could get a casting today if I was doing something.
To create the castings on the shrine, a technique known as lost wax casting was used, a process that can be traced back to 3500 BC in Mesopotamia. The earliest castings were made from copper, a soft and malleable metal. The metalsmith soon found that a combination of metal ores such as copper and tin would create a hard-wearing metal alloy with multiple uses from the functional to the decorative. The metalsmith builds each object working with prepared beeswax that can be carved and moulded to create fine detailed patterns, knowing that the resultant shape and surface texture will be reproduced in the metal.
The wax worker, who the people that were, the master craftsman or whatever that was doing it, when you consider in today's world, we have all these waxes, carving waxes that I could do, and make it a lot easier, it doesn't split or whatever.
The finished wax pattern is then coated with clay to create a detailed mould. After heating the mould to remove the wax, molten metal is poured into the cavity, forming the desired shape. Once cooled, the mould is broken to reveal the casting, which is then finished using tools like chisels and burnishers.
They were using beeswax, probably with some type of stiffener in it, I would imagine. But to get the detail and the fineness of all this is, I just find remarkable. And then to go from there to the casting process and to get it right.
Kevin has a very modern workshop, but the monks had to feed their kilns with a steady supply of charcoal in order to generate the heat needed to melt precious metals.
They would have harvested oak from a forest, which was abundant in those days. They would have then charred it, and charring is putting it into a kiln and very slowly burning it so that it chars but does not burn. Actually, it's smoking it, and it's been used. Charring has been used because it maintains its heat and it can get a very high heat. If you could imagine, this was charcoal here, and charcoal, of course, is like so. It's the oak charred. Okay, and it would have been charred, and they would have had a bellows here with one person working the bellows, and the heat would have been this whole piece here, and within that then they would have laid their pieces to for casting and for their soldering. They would have laid pieces. I think it would have been a big event in the monastery, and I think a lot of the monks from different areas would all be there to see the process, because there's nothing more wonderful than seeing a bronze pour when the fire just comes up. This is just a small fire here, but you can imagine a large bronze pour and everything happening. It's magic. It's alchemy. In the 12th century, it was magic. When it was completed, it had silver background, the gold floating on the silver, and then the middle bosses were all jewels.
There would have been figures along here. These were originally laid out on a silver foil. So you would have these are gilded with gold. Originally, you can see the gilding surviving on some of them better than others.
Fire gilding, known as the butter of gold, was a technique used to layer gold onto bronze casting and was widely used in 12th century Ireland. A lot of the gilding has worn away over time, but it allows us to imagine the vivid original appearance in the 12th century when newly gilded and polished.
It was a process in which they took 1 part gold, 8 parts mercury, and made an amalgam. And then they would have applied it onto the piece. They would have painted it on with a brush of some sort, and put it on a clay tray and put it over the charcoal, and slowly heated to evaporate off the mercury. That would happen about 375 degrees centigrade. So what you had was the mercury evaporated and the gold was in place, so it was plated with the gold. In the 12th century, when they were walking down in procession with that, if you didn't believe in God, what the hell were you thinking? That was amazing.
Originally, the shrine had 50 figures, all with unique characteristics.
They hold individual attributes. So this figure is wearing a book. Here we have a guy pulling his own beard. There's another guy holds a ball. This guy holds an axe in his hand. These hold sticks. And this figure here is wearing a bishop's hat. This shrine is part of a kind of a wider European tradition of shrines at this time, but it's uniquely Irish at the same time, and that's the beauty of it. By the time we get to the late 11th and early 12th centuries, we're also seeing influence from Scandinavia, from places like Norway, where we have styles of ornament there, again animal ornament, and we're seeing that influence. So what we're seeing on the shrine behind us is a mix between Irish animal ornament, sometimes it's referred to as Celtic art or insular art, and then we're seeing late Scandinavian or late Viking art influence as well. In particular, a style known as the Urnes style, which is named after a stave church, a wooden church in Norway. That's the best example, if you like, of the style in question.
We are used to seeing our national treasures in museums, but it is local passion and pride that has preserved this stellar work.
It is by far our finest reliquary and also our most intact one, in that there wasn't like every 100 years somebody deciding to do something to it and to do a change to it. And I think that's, for me, I think one of the reasons for that is because it stayed in the one place the whole time. It did not travel around, it was not taken to different places, that it stayed within a community, and the community minded it and watched it.
My earliest memories of the shrine was it was kept in a side altar in the church, just under the little tabernacle and the side altar, and just a curtain across it. And it was there for years until different priests would come along at different stages to. Some of them had huge interest in promoting it, others just left it as it was. But it was Father Lane was here at a particular time in the 70s. Around 72, he decided to put it on display. It needed to be, and he put it up on a glass case.
When we renovated the church, we had a legal agreement with the National Museum that they would take care of it while we were renovating the church, but they would give it back to us. So they had to give it back then. They were reluctant, but we got it back, and we have our security system and all of that. But it is phenomenal, and I know maybe there's not as many visitors seeing it as there would be in the National Museum. However, we have to keep part of Offaly within Offaly.
That's what's very special about the shrine behind me, that it's still in its religious context. It's not a museum object.